Good evening. I'll be extremely brief. My role here is just to introduce, it's my privilege to introduce our main speaker tonight, Mr. Jonas Rück. He's a co-author of a book, Suisse, Romansh Newmont, in Japanese, as you can hear. He's also a PhD candidate at Harvard University, and he will give the main talk tonight about Romansh language in Switzerland. So please join me in welcoming Jonas Rück on the stage.
All right. Well, buonasera a tutti, and good evening. Thank you very, very much for your interest in Romansh, which is a bit of a niche topic perhaps, but I'm sure it will offer quite a few takeaways for a broader audience to understand something about Switzerland, its political history and its political culture today. And so this is going to be a little bit of a crash course in a field that's not my main field of research. I usually do research on environmental history of early modern Japan, and that's also why I'm currently living in Tokyo. But Romansh studies has been accompanying me throughout my academic career so far as a side project that's just very dear to me, and so I'm very excited to be here tonight and present a statement for diversity, cohesion, participation, and local development in Romansh-speaking Switzerland. That's the title that I decided to go for. So before I jump into tonight's talk, I would like to thank the embassy for this honor to be here. And for me, this is particularly nice because I used to work here at the embassy, quite a decade ago as a trainee. And so to be back and work again with Takashi-san and Suzuki-san is here tonight, but just to be back and, oh, she's here. Awesome, yeah, so thank you so much for your help with preparing this event tonight. It's really wonderful to be back. Et je voudrais aussi remercier Monsieur l'ambassadeur pour l'invitation de présenter ce soir e ringrazio anche in particolare il ministro degli esteri, il signor Ignazio Cassis, che ha deciso di offrire questo spazio per le minoranze linguistiche della Svizzera che di solito vengono rappresentate troppo poco all'estero, e quindi è un'opportunità molto rara di fare fare questa presentazione in Giappone. Io celebro il fatto di avere questa occasione, di usare questa sera che vale la pena per quelli delungati tedeschi, che io sezzo, e sono per quelli delungati giapponesi, come mio amico Tomoya Sakaguchi, di imprendere Romansh e di imparare a capire le differenti perspective delle regioni in Svizzera. Als Zürcher bin ich nicht romanisch aufgewachsen, sondern ich habe das im Erwachsenenalter gelernt, als ich die Gelegenheit dazu hatte, und werde deshalb ein bisschen von einer Außenseiterperspektive sprechen. So, full disclosure, I'm not actually a Romansh native speaker, but I'm just an interested citizen who is speaking to you tonight. And since I like to talk about things that I'm passionate about, I ran into Sakaguchi-san when I was studying in Kyoto. He will be speaking to us later tonight, and he sensed that he would be interested in learning Romansh, and so I got him on board with a book project. So this is where I studied Romansh, and this in the Grisons, and where also Tomoya later embarked on this project of studying Romansh. And so I got him on board for a book project that all of Japan has been long waiting for. It is language travel guide for Romansh in Japanese. Here you go. Some 8 years ago. I'm not sure whether the book has been selling in huge numbers since its publication, but at least it landed us this job tonight.
After 2 nights it will change.
Pardon?
After 2 nights it will change.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, obviously my expectation is that everybody, if he goes on Amazon and buys a copy, I think it's 3,000 something. Anyway, no, you don't have to do that, because I'll give you a summary of what's written in there tonight. So, yeah, let's see really quickly whether we have any representatives of the Romansh community in the audience tonight, if you happen to be from the Grisons. No? If you, yeah. Oh yeah, Roger. How much Romansh do you speak? Are you
I understand Yiddish, but my tongue is German.
Awesome. Anyway, Rocher knows the Grisons very well. He grew up there, so please talk to him in the reception, and I'm sure he will have a lot of stories also about Romansh to share. So, but in a nutshell, what's important to know about Romansh and what's important to know about multilingualism in Switzerland? So, I know we have different levels of familiarity with Switzerland in the audience tonight. So, just really quickly, so I guess most people in Japan tend to know that Switzerland has 4 official languages, and to my surprise, a lot of them can even name all the languages, including Romansh, and oftentimes people tend to believe that Romansh is like the one really Swiss national language, a lingua franca that everybody knows. After all, German, French, and Italian have already been claimed by adjacent nation states, but as it is, this situation is a bit more complicated. So on this map here, these are the communities of which the country consists, and the majorities of speakers in each local community. In red for German, blue for French, green for Italian, and then here yellow for Romansh. And you see these are places with absolute majorities of Romansh speakers. Then we have gray zones, whereas there's a buffer zone between Romansh and German. These are areas, villages that have lost an absolute majority of Romansh speakers over the last 150 years or so, and that are now not simply German-speaking, but rather I would like to think of them as multicultural, multilingual zones. In fact, gray stands for no dominant language, right? That reaches 50%. And in fact, so Graubünden, all of Graubünden has a rather significant tourist industry that brings in lots of working forces from outside of the country, from places such as Portugal, and these people tend to pick up Romansh much more easily than Swiss German, given the fact that it is a Romance language. And so in that sense, multilingualism in this region, I guess, facilitates a somewhat more open society towards migration. And another benefit that I would like to make a pitch for tonight is, well, if you grow up in this greater zone of cultural contact, chances are you grow up bilingual or even trilingual. So you get several languages on your way. I don't think it matters that much how many people speak those languages, but the fact that you grow up with languages not being a duty imposed by school, but something that you naturally get on your way from your family, or that you use actively with your childhood friends playing out on the streets, that makes a difference, and it changes your attitude towards cultural diversity and towards different realities of life, I would like to argue. So, and conversely, so it looks as though Romansh was retreating, right? But actually, we should not forget that many Romansh-speaking people now live outside of their traditional Romansh territory in places such as Zurich. In fact, Zurich is light red because there are so many people speaking languages other than German. And Zurich has a community, a Romansh community of about 3,500 people. And these people, well, unfortunately, as soon as we make maps that represent languages, we fail to really represent the fluidity of migration, but also individual biographies. So just keep this in mind. So let's look into the history for a moment and into the reason why we're here tonight, because today is February the 20th, the 82nd anniversary of a constitutional amendment that made Romansh a national language by referendum. And in the time, 1938, 92% of the voting population supported such an amendment. That is quite a strong statement for the nation state and the nation state in its diversity, right? Now, but the historical context, of course, if I say 1938, a year before the outbreak of World War II, things were tense in Europe and also within Switzerland itself. And, restoring the cohesion of the nation state was a core sort of program that the government tried to tackle with a program called Intellectual Defense of the Nation, or Geistige Landesverteidigung. And I think this is the context within which we have to understand this referendum. And to evidence this, I brought along this brochure here that was published during the referendum campaign, and with a famous slogan that goes like, stai si Romansh defenda te vel Lungach, and that means something like stand up Romansh in sense of Romansh person, and defend your old language. And so this idea of Romansh is an old, ancient culture that is retreating into the mountains in the last bulwarks of the really Swiss, pre-industrial self. Mount Farm is a museum of our national past. It's a bit something like the spirit in which national parks were founded about 2 decades earlier. So some sort of paternalistic dialogue was discourse was constructed mainly by Germanic people, but it was also embraced by Romansh intellectuals, such as the Peter Rumantscha that I just cited. And on the long run, of course, that played out as an advantage for language preservation. And in fact, even nowadays, 82 years later, the idea that we speak 4 languages is usually purported quite prominently in government publications, and also just people, I think, really embrace this idea that we are a nation of minorities that have to keep together. And whether that's true in practice or not is a different story perhaps, but at least from what I can tell, the minority complex applies also to the German majority, that at 62% actually is an absolute majority of the whole nation state, but still within the Germanophone community in the world, again, Swiss Germans are distinguished by their quite peculiar dialect, and so the idea that we might be something like a minority could also be argued in that case. And of course, so this list here claims that we speak 4 languages. Of course, not everybody does, but in fact, we speak many more languages. So here you can see about above 20% of the population now is native, I think, mother tongue, a language that's not one of the 4 national languages. So this is how multicultural a world we're living in today. So what sets Romansh apart from these other languages that many of them have larger numbers of speakers, such as Albanian, Serbo-Croatian, also English nowadays? Still 5 minutes.
You have 7-8 more minutes to go. Just to let you know.
So anyway, so what sets Romansh apart in this situation is the fact that the language evolved within the territory. And so in the early modern period, if we look back in time, what is now the Free State of the Three Leagues was an independent state that based its creation largely on federalist principles, because it had to bridge linguistic, religious, and geographical divisions. And so the localities had a lot of freedom in attending to their own business in their own local language. And this has mostly, remained, or is now translated into the present in this patchwork of different language policies. So you can see the brown areas are those that have maintained one of the Romansh idioms as their unique language of administration and public education. Red stands for those places that have chosen Italian or German. And then the shades in between are different versions of bilingualism in administration and education. Now, this is a bit abstract, I know, and so I asked my friend Marino Manec from DCT. He's a firefighter, 24 or 25 years old, I think, and he gave me a little bit of an account what's his relationship with language like. And so he told me, we learned German starting in grade 3, English in secondary school. Meanwhile, Romansh was primary language of instruction, of course. Swiss German we had to study in private. During my apprenticeship, I used only German since I had to go down to Kur for school. So he left the region and he had to use German only. And at the Fire Brigade, where he's working now, we speak Romansh, even though we have a few that don't know it that well. And I think this last sentence is key, because it expresses how, while it is very local, Romansh has a strong integrative power within the local society, and people have to, immigrants in many cases have to some degree to pick it up in order to keep up. And for that reason, I would like to argue that we should actually be speaking of a small language rather than a minority language, because ultimately whether you're a minority depends completely on the framework of reference, right? And if you are from a place like Byzantium, you can see more than 90% of locals there are native speakers of Romansh. So if you're like me, going there as a Swiss German, you're the minority. And that has played out to my advantage because I wanted to learn Romansh and get full immersion, and that was not all that hard in Byzantium. Just a few numbers. So the most recent official numbers speak of 40,000 roughly native speakers, but obviously how do you define whether somebody speaks a language? That's very subjective, and you can stretch it up to 100,000 if you want to. It's probably somewhere in between, but again, it depends on the definition. Another thing that's been very, very helpful for my project of getting full immersion is the fact that the Romansh TV station airs a daily news program, and the radio station is almost on air 24/7. You can also read your daily newspaper in Romansh or breakfast. Then there are a surprising number of novels, poetry, music, and so on published every year. There's also a literature festival. And then obviously what's very important, cultural events such as open air festivals. Open air Rumantscha is rather well known. The Romansh community, youth community gathers there every year. I also brought along a picture of Lyricas Analas, that's a techno rap band that has made it into the national top 10 chart with their Romansh lyrics several times in the past. And I think they keep singing. So this is just how much is going on in cultural production. So why is it important that there are these media? You know, the world changes, right? And language must change too. But how do we speak of, for instance, the coronavirus in Romansh? How do you say quarantine in Romansh? You may not have known before a few weeks ago. How do we speak about impeachment? I think I looked it up, actually. Well, yeah, here, Destitution de Fezi, I wouldn't have known. Anyway, since news media report on these things in Romansh, these terms become introduced on a regular basis. Now, if you're an artist or an author, Romansh offers additional tools and dimensions of experimentation, expression. For local society, again, the act of engaging in language preservation around choirs, around sports events, carnival this weekend in this and this. These are moments where the community gathers and where you get, a certain sense of community identity, participation are facilitated through the activities around the language. And ultimately, what's important, you get a sense of owning the state and owning the community, because how much more can you be a shareholder of the state than if you can go to the community assembly and speak in your local language if you're such a small community, right? So this is very important for the cohesion of the country. For local business and tourism, again, language adds a layer of meaning to the territory, right? And this layer of meaning is enjoyed as a brand by visitors, tourists, but also by more remote consumers that trust the brand. And so recently there has actually been a bit of a boom in marketing, and I've brought along two examples here. On the left side you can see the beer Galanga Glach. Glach is the Romansh word for ice. And in the background you see, idyllic landscape of lakes, hills in Orangutan Valley in the winter. And so you associate this word Glach with purity, with freshness, with absence of contamination, something like that. That's what Romansh stands for in advertising now. On the right side we have Banca Claire. It's a bank that used to be known as Co-op Bank until a few years ago, until they consciously changed their name into a Romansh word, as they explain on their website. So this was a very conscious choice because, Romansh in this context stands for authenticity, continuity, resilience, know-how, and so on. So there's a lot to gain out of this sort of cultural fund that you can tap into. The fact, it sells really. as we can see tonight. I mean, such a great audience. So the fact that Romansh sells also is represented in recent more sort of pop cultural productions in German language. I'll wrap up in a moment. Schellenursli, this is a book originally published in Romansh in 1945, and it's been an evergreen. I think generations of Swiss people have been growing up with it. I just asked Jonas, even in Swiss Romansh, it's not a really right. Yeah. So everybody knows it. It's a Romansh product, and recently it was turned into a movie in 2015. The movie is in Swiss German, but it purports Romansh quite prominently, because here again it stands for the longing for the genuine, for the rural, for the truly Swiss. You know, also a bit. I think it's some sort of pseudo 19th century world that we imagine through the language. And some of you may actually have come across the Japanese version of Urusli no Suzu that has been translated in 1973 already, but it has been reprinted several times, most recently in 2018. And so I guess there's also a generation of Japanese children growing up with Romansh literature. And in fact, when I was working at the tourist information in Zurich, back when I was an undergraduate student, I was surprised to see how many, especially Japanese people, but basically people from all around the world, would ask me how to get to Guarda, the village of Schellenursli. And on the right, you can see the website, Graubünden Tourism, that actually advertises it as the homeland of Schellenursli. So this is just one out of many examples of how local culture can translate into, well, local economy, if you want, but also just, you know, meaning assigned to the territory, cultural meaning. So to conclude, well, I brought along this picture here. This is from the railway station at Isentis, again, where I was studying Romansh. And you can see Scomandado attraversar Spinaris, do not cross the railway lanes, and this is how cosmopolitan we are, Sendo Yokobite wa Ikemasen, very cute Japanese version of the same content. And I think this picture, it expresses the way Romansh mingles now among the culture of the 21st century, the international languages, and it expresses, in a way, it argues that this opening up, this globalization, this movement of people is a chance. It's not just a threat. It's not just a majority running over a retreating minority, a relic of the past. No, we are here, they are here, in the 21st century, and history goes on with us, all of us. And so, in fact, I think we shouldn't be surprised to know, to hear Romansh now from the mouth of somebody Japanese. And this somebody Japanese is my friend Tomoya Sakaguchi, who will share a few, come up please, he will share a few memories from his project of learning Romansh in Switzerland, right? So I hand the mic to you.
Okay, thank you.